Governor Kathy Hochul gave her annual State of the State speech this week. She emphasized affordability, saying every family deserves more money. In this case, that means rebate checks, tax cuts, child tax credits, housing incentives, and free school lunch. She also made proposals on mental health, public safety, and housing. She did not mention the Cap and Invest plan to curb carbon emissions. The cost of living is indeed high here in New York. So Anirban, is Hochul's idea or plan for making things more affordable an effective approach?
Yeah, I mean, that's the affordable thing that she was been talking about. So I'm going to I just read the couple of parts of the speech that was interesting. Tax cut for middle class making $323,000 or less, and then apparently inflation refund checks for $500 to the middle class. I think these policies could be better done, but expanding the child tax credit, 100,000 new homes, and then at least one New York City police officer in every train between 9 p.m. and 5 p.m. So those are the things that she had talked about. And then there was something about involuntary commitment that I think the Legal Aid Society came out against, saying that this is not good for people with mental health.
Concerned in New York City, there have been some horrible crimes on the subway.
Right, so that you can involuntarily commit. So the Legal Aid Society said that you're waiting for people to get to that kind of breaking point when they can't take care of themselves, and then you're forcing them to kind of the incarceration kind of stuff. But there's still a budget gap. I mean, it's a $15 billion. If you look at money that will come in from the new tolling system, it's $15 billion, and still the budget gap is $33 billion.
Well, that's money to go that's slated for the Metropolitan Transit, the subways and trains in New York.
Right, and then I didn't see anything for education expansion, but I might have missed that.
Okay, getting back to this idea of affordability. I mean, is this a way to cut the cost of living? Just give people money?
Well, I mean, look, the good of this policy is that she's focusing on effective government programs. There's a couple of years ago, a trio of Maxwell School economists wrote, it's acutely titled, Let Them Eat Lunch paper. It's a very good paper that basically finds that universal free lunch, for example, improves the test scores of middle school students. And it also, there's another paper that argues that it increases attendance rates for K through 3 kids. And so, that and targeted tax cuts and child credits, these are all very effective poverty alleviation tools. So if that's your goal, she's going for the right programs. The but is, it feels like a populist trap. How expensive is this going to be? Where is this money coming from? I have no idea.
Well, a populist trap, I mean, she's obviously running for re-election in 26, I think, right, Sarah?
Yeah, it does smack a little bit of desperation to try to raise her, favorability ratings. She's subject to the same thing that President Biden was, which is political scientists call the cost of ruling. Your popularity goes down over time, almost inevitably. Governments and parties and executives are penalized for failures much more than they are rewarded for their successes. And so, there's a lot of grumpiness, in this state and across the country about inflation, about high costs of living, about high costs of really fundamental things like housing, healthcare, education. And so she is trying to, I think, try to give something back. But I agree with Chad that a lot of these are actually sound and good ideas that could possibly help. I mean, New York State has the highest tax burden of any state in the country. And it's not the only reason people are leaving this state, but it's certainly one reason people give for moving elsewhere. And I think she really wants to try to stop that. I don't know if this will help, but it'll help a lot of people. I do agree that I don't really understand how middle class is $323,000 a year, though.
Right.
That strikes me as going to the expense side that Chad mentioned. One thing would be to lower that, right? Because I'm sorry, I don't think the average income in in New York State, the median income, I should say, is $84,500.
I read it as what wasn't in there. And what wasn't in there is anything mention of Trump. And this seemed to be, boy, New York Democrats are really worried about Trump. They lost so many votes compared to 2016. And I think if we continue that on, I think about the census in 2030, where New York may lose 4 seats. in the Electoral College, which is going to be a huge blow for the state trying to figure that out. And I think one thing she does mention, which I think they need more on, is more housing. How is the New York State going to get, they have she created an ombudsman's position to try to do that, but it's so difficult to build housing. And if there's one thing that this state needs, it's cheaper and just more housing.
Mm-hmm. And she has been pushing, she pushed that last year.
She did push it last
well.
year, but it's the thing that, I think the other thing that makes it so expensive here, particularly in the city, in Long Island, Westchester, is just how expensive housing is.
Mm-hmm. Will Barclay, the Republican leader in the Assembly, said these are pretty good Republican proposals, and so I'm wondering whether we may be the dawn of an age of bipartisanship in New York State.
Yeah, the
Could that be?
Republican objection I read was that it referred to the congestion tax. And like, frankly, the congestion tax is a good idea. But there is a bipartisan or nonpartisan citizen budget commission that basically says we cannot fund these ideas in the long run unless it restrains spending elsewhere. And that's the question.
So